Well, I think as Garcia Marquez, one of our heroes, said, journalism and fiction have a lot in common. I think that they're both work from observation. Both are attempts to tell stories and interpret, the society we live in. I learned a tremendous amount in journalism that I incorporated in my fiction. I learned how to observe. I learned the value of going places that I would ordinarily not go. But I think that fiction allows us to go into a deeper kind of truth, which is the emotional truth, which are the things that are often unspoken. Journalism is reporting facts, and one has to be faithful to the facts, and one has to be very open-minded. In fiction, in art, it's important to believe in something. It's important to have passion, and for me, I've been very fortunate in my career to be able to bring these two very noble crafts together. That in the United States especially, generally speaking, the journalist is someone who doesn't really have an explicit point of view. And I feel that, as a book writer, I am making more of a statement about the time that I live in, especially since a novel is so much longer and so much deeper. It's an attempt to say, this is the time that I lived in, this is the city that I lived in, and this is what I saw, this is what I find hurtful, this is what is beautiful about this time. Yes, I think that there is a sort of deeper vision that comes from writing fiction. Well, I know that in my lifetime, the country has become less tolerant. It's become more closed-minded. It's become more nativist. There is more xenophobia. That's not to say that xenophobia dominates the discussion about immigration. I think that only a minority of people are xenophobic in the United States. So that has become something that's part of the discourse in the last 10, 15 years. That's why I started to write my novel, The Barbarian Nurseries. In fact, I started it many, many years earlier when the anti-immigrant movement began in California in the early 1990s. My vision of that is that that movement that began in California has now circled the globe. I watched it start in Los Angeles, spread to the rest of the United States, and reach Europe. To see that movement of people who blame the immigrant for a general social decline. The economic crisis in the United States of the last few years, the austerity, has led many people to look for the obvious blame. For them is that if you see that things are worse, well, what is different? Well, what's different is that there are more people from Latin America living among us. They must be using up the money for the schools, they must be using up the money for the welfare programs. So I think it has gotten worse, but at the same time, I think it has reached almost as bad a situation as it can, because there's nowhere else for the right to go with its program. The right cannot do anything. The next step would be to do mass deportations. But the United States is a democracy, and it won't accept scenes like from the Gestapo. They won't go that far. And so there is, I think, a growing, people are beginning to become aware that there needs to be some sort of an amnesty or some sort of a policy to allow people who are undocumented to become documented.
Mediapart.
There is an homage to reading and to culture in my novel. And there's something very important that, and I only learned this recently about myself, is that my grandmother did not know how to read or write. And this was a real source of shame for my father. So my father came to the United States, was educated in high school in the United States as a 20-year-old immigrant. So he taught me that writing and reading were the most important thing. And so in my novel is my attempt to become a writer, a serious writer. And I can tell you that being here in France, I feel like I finally achieved my goal. To be here where the book is taken so seriously, And so, yes, my novel is in it are buried all the writers that I studied while I was writing the book. I read Shakespeare seriously for the first time in my 40s when I was working on this novel, because I thought, I'm an English writer, I need to know Shakespeare. So that's why there's one chapter that begins with Julius Caesar and ends with Hamlet, being the parts that make the story go. And there's also little things that are there to John Cheever, the great short story writer of the United States, Italo Calvino. There's a Calvino Street. There is really no Calvino Street in Los Angeles. I put that in there because that section of the book where they go to Los Angeles, that was inspired by Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities. And then the epigraphs too. The epigraphs are meant to go back in history. So the first one is by Don DeLillo, and it's The American Mystery Deepens. And that's because I wanted people to know this is an American novel. Because there's a segregation in American literature. There's Latino literature, and there's black literature, and there's American literature, which means, white literature. Many writers have changed that. Toni Morrison, who's here, was the person who was a hero for me, because she, helped sort of destroy all of these barriers. So that's why I start with DeLillo. And then as we go deeper into the novel, each epigraph is further back in time. So the next one is Richard Wright. Richard Wright, as you know, lived here in France for many years. And then the last one is Mark Twain. And so the novel goes back, the epigraphs go further back in time. And the very last section of the novel, well, I don't want to give away the ending, but as the characters, are heading to their final destination, all of that is, there's a little homage to Mark Twain and Huckleberry Finn, where the freeway is like the Mississippi River. And so all of that was my own very conscious celebration of all the people that I've read and who taught me how to be both a writer and a thinker. I think I started with the gardens because I had read Chekhov, and because I wanted to tap into what it's like to be déclassé, to lose your class. And of course Chekhov in The Cherry Orchard has this beautiful metaphor of the cherry orchard. So I decided that I would have the garden, and then I had two gardens. Yes, because in the gardens symbolize these two sort of poles in California, the California psyche. One is the idea that you can bring anything to California and have it grow. And so we have many, many non-native trees. The palm trees that we have in California, almost all of them are from somewhere else. They're from Africa, right? And so, we stole the water from the mountains to grow all these plants. And the part of what California is the idea we can do anything. This is the land of we can build anything, destroy anything. That's what California is. The other part of California is this part that says, we're in this beautiful place, in this beautiful creation of nature. Let's appreciate it. Let's preserve it, right? And so Maureen goes from having this garden that takes all of this water that's, unnatural, and brings in the desert, and learns to appreciate it. And I think that tension, that back and forth, is what defines California's madness. It's more just a description of the reality of a city like Los Angeles, is that really it is this incredible crossroads where people come from everywhere. Maureen is from Missouri, which is like another world to Los Angeles. Scott, his family's from Mexico and from Maine. I purposely chose places with the letter M in them. And then of course Araceli is from Mexico. No, I think it's more just a description of what Los Angeles is. In Los Angeles, we had a native people. But now there are maybe, 1,000 of them left, or maybe less. Most of them are, the great-great-grandchildren of the Yagna, of the Gabrielino Indians. They were wiped out. So everyone who lives there came from somewhere else. That is a very common thing in a previous generation of people in Los Angeles, was that you tried to forget your native language, you tried to assimilate. Now more than ever, people try to hold on to their language. However, in general too, Los Angeles is a place that has tried to erase its history. For us from California, it is so amazing to be in a place where there's medieval history that you can touch. Here we are in Vincennes. I can reach out and touch this castle, these walls that are 700 years old. In Los Angeles, everything that we had from the 19th century 90% of it we destroyed. I happen to live in a part of the city where there is still a little bit of the 19th century left, and we take care of it. Now California values what it has from its past. And in my novel, yes, that is a recurring theme, the idea that there's history everywhere. You can't escape it. You might want to bury it, you might want to destroy it, but it's everywhere. And so, and that Los Angeles, that people think of it as a place without history, has history and suffers because of its history. Having a black president is more a reflection of how the country has changed. I mean, first of all, he is a product of a biracial marriage. You know, he's half white, and that is an increasing part of the reality of the United States. I think that the United States is, the middle class especially, is much more comfortable with racial diversity. In my novel, I make fun of that. You know, I make fun of the fact that among middle class people, it's considered rude to mention race, even though we come from all these different races. Mexican is a word that sounds harsh, can sound harsh to someone who's not Mexican in that circle. So I think that Obama's election is a reflection of that, of this society that is somewhat more comfortable with racial diversity.
Mediapart.
Both my works are about that secret that people don't know about Los Angeles. There's this image of Los Angeles as a place of sunshine, plastic surgery, movie stars, the image of Beverly Hills, of the West Side, whereas I know Los Angeles has a Soweto in its heart. There is an apartheid in Los Angeles. And my novels are about this contradiction, this contrast between the image that we have of Los Angeles as a place of opportunity and beauty and hopefulness, and this reality of this incredible class divide and the social contradictions. Yes. In California, we see a more exaggerated picture of what's happening in the rest of the United States. Yes, because, for example, the city of Los Angeles is 49% Latino now. It was, when I was growing up, it was 10% Latino. So the city has undergone this incredible transformation. And there are many cultural contradictions that we see in Los Angeles that are now beginning to appear in other parts of the country. Now Latino immigration has spread from the Southwest all the way into the heart of the United States. So I think that that's what I said in my second book, Translation Nation, is about the transformation of the United States, and that I think that Los Angeles is exporting its model to the rest of the United States, that model of having a very large Latino workforce, of having Spanish language media, of having a very proud Latin American culture in the city. I mean, I think Los Angeles is really the northernmost metropolis of Latin America, and Los Angeles is a place where English has become a Latin American language, right? And so I think that's happening in the rest of the United States. We founded the anti-immigrant movement, and now that is present in every state of the United States. I was very proud. My second book came out, The Translation Nation, and I was able to look up all the libraries that had purchased it at one point, and my book was in every state of the United States, all 50 states, because all 50 states have Latino people in them. So yes, that is, Los Angeles has always, but California has always been that way. California has always been a place where new things arise. Where, you know, it's a place where our society seems to experiment. In Los Angeles, if you are a working average person, you will hear in the course of a day, it's very easy to hear not just English and Spanish, but also Armenian or Korean spoken in little pieces. And so that's part of the linguistic landscape, right? I don't know if here in France it's common to hear Arabic every once in a while or to hear another language, but in Los Angeles, working life is very linguistically diverse. The other thing, though, is that it's in what's in my head, because I'm from a bilingual family, and I think I toss around Spanish in my literature, much like Nabokov has French in his. Nabokov is the prose master of English for me in the 20th century, and yet he has much untranslated French in his novels, and it's because that's part of what's in his head. And I think that's in my head, is this Spanish. English is the language I write in. It's the language I was mostly educated in, but I have Spanish in my head. Araceli is my alter ego. because she's an intellectual in the body of an immigrant. And generally speaking, people don't think of immigrants as having an intellectual life. I'm really proud of the characters who come in my novel who are sort of autodictat, working people. Like the man who is the construction worker, but who has all the leftist publications that he gets subscribed. Because that's a real person. Those people exist in Los Angeles. And so there's this image of the immigrant as the noble savage, as the, and Araceli is my subversion of that stereotype. And she's also, but I gave her my observations. So she observed, because that's what I've lived. I've lived myself personally. I've lived seeing all the strata of American society, of Los Angeles and California society, from the poorest of the poor to the richest of the rich, because I have the privilege of being a journalist. And so in my job, there were days when I was a journalist where I would start off in Compton, in Watts, and I would end up in Beverly Hills because I was doing many things at once. And I think that is what I gave to Araceli. She is an observer of the society, yes. I started off with, the idea was that I wanted to subvert the stereotype of the immigrant nanny. How do you say in French, the bonne? La bonne. I wanted to subvert that character because in American popular culture, in American films, yes, that character, La Bonne, is always, the very nice, pleasant woman on the side. She likes the children. She's a figure of controlled, separated motherness. And I wanted her to make her complicated, and I wanted to make her mean, and I wanted to make her have her own very strong attitude, and so that took me. It took me a very long time to do that. I think that humor was really important because I gave her this this sense of just how absurd many of the things that she sees in, and I gave her ideas. I'm very proud of the passages where she remarks on like the word carcajada, which means laughter in Spanish. And all of her observations of American democracy, I gave her all of that, and it took many years for me to build her. And plus, I had to think the way a woman thinks, which I could do maybe an hour a day. I would be able to think like a woman, and then I would write my notes about what a woman might think of that situation. So that was a lot of fun. In the American society, those two jobs, the job of keeping everything green and the job of making sure the children are fed, are jobs that are done by immigrants. Now, in American public right-wing discourse, the immigrant is a savage because Mexico is a barbaric place. Mexico is a place where they cut people's heads off. Mexico is a place where the people don't get educated to read and write. And so what I'm saying is this is the land of the barbarian nannies, of the barbarian gardeners, because that's what exists in the popular imagination. And at the same time, the word keeps on coming up because then the characters turn it around. Araceli says, now they are the barbarians, because when she sees the couple fighting among themselves, they're the barbarians and I'm the civilized one. They're the savages. And of course, the events in the last part of the novel are barbaric, the way that people are treated in a very undemocratic way. Immigrants are treated in an undemocratic way. And then finally, my French publisher, she liked the sound of printemps, barbare, because printemps has a political meaning today, because of the Arab Spring, because of the many of the Paris Springs that have 1968 and beyond, right? And excuse me. And so in the French title, there is this idea, which I really like, of this time when the barbarians, when the outsiders have their moment of power. And that's what happens with Araceli. Araceli is someone who's seemingly powerless, but who has she has this redemption in the novel. So I like that.